And we are here. You are here with me. We are together. This is episode 51 of ScienPaulogy. Welcome to the podcast, my friends. My friends. My people. My ScienPaulologists. Apologists? We've talked about this before, I think. Don't really know how to call you. What would you prefer to be called? What's your pronoun? Let me know, and I'll do my best to either call you that or probably just avoid you. That's probably what it'll end up being. Got my little cup of tea going on here because it's fucking 36 degrees and probably colder in my apartment. Goodness. It is just a cold damn Wednesday on January 22nd, 2020. What the hell are we going to talk about next year when it's 2021? Probably just the same kind of shit that we're talking about now. Except maybe things will be even more crazier. Even more crazy. Even less sane. What's the right way to say all this shit? We're going to have to come up with something because it's certainly not going to get more, what do you say, level? I don't know. Maybe it will. We acclimate quickly to things. People, in general, we just decide that abnormal is normal pretty quick. It's just one of those things that we do. There's I think there's some kind of psychological term for that. Like just sort of finding whatever just to be fit into the rhythm of your own life without constantly being like as an example, which is hard to avoid, just the existence of Donald Trump as the president of the United States is probably the best case we can use for this. So, to me, every time I think about it, it's never normal. It will never be a normal thing. And I think that was where the big rift happened with most people when this whole kind of, I guess it was the first firing that we can really cite in the culture wars that we're completely wrapped up inside of now and constantly talk about. I have to take my headphones off. I'm listening to myself too intensely. I do this every time. I hear myself and then I start to get bothered by the sound of my own voice and it's distracting. So I gotta just monitor the audio and then let it go. Okay, so anyway, using Donald Trump as an example of things that are that we can sort of normalize when they're clearly crazy. So this is the example that I always use, which is that's not normal. And if this phenomenon of normalizing insane shit weren't real, we would all feel that way all the time. And I think that this is a big thing that we need to kind of pay attention to, right? Like, every person has... Sorry for these weird long pauses. This is the way that I speak, by the way. If you're just joining the podcast and you haven't before, this is my podcast. It's called ScienPaulogy. I'm Paul. That's why it's called that. This is sort of my cult in a strange way. You're being indoctrinated into that right now, and we're happy to have you on board. There's really very limited commitment that it is required of you to be a part of this. You know, it's nothing too sexual. We mostly just hang out and get deep about weird stuff and try to have a couple of laughs. So, as far as cults go, it's not a bad one to be a part of. Very limited amount of financial commitment. I'm raising money for a show that I'm going to be taking to Scotland. I also have a Patreon page for the podcast, which just helps me basically do things to make the podcast more interesting, if that's possible. So, and if you would like to donate to that Patreon, you can go to my website, which is pauloddo.com, and you can scroll down to the middle of the page, and there'll be a link to do that. That's the plug. All right, so carrying on, or at least trying to maintain this thread that I was working on about things becoming normalized, which are clearly insane. So, in my mind, because I fall on the side of never thinking it is normal that Donald Trump is the president of the United States. Not saying he didn't win, I'm just saying it's not normal. And we can't really ever act like it is, because that says something about us losing touch with reality, I feel like. To me, every single day, whatever news headlines you subscribe to, whatever news source you go to, every single day there should be a number of days that Donald Trump has been the president. It should say, Donald Trump is still the president after so many days. What are we doing about this? Have we learned anything? Are we on the right track? What the hell is going on? And then carrying on with whatever news stories you see. Because here's the big disconnection as far as I can understand. I think that we could all be doing better in trying to get along with each other. I think that we could all extend better, what would you call it? We could extend a hand of hopeful credit to each other when we speak to each other, if we disagree with each other's political philosophies or whatever those might be. I feel like we could all just be hoping the best of each other a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like when you speak to somebody, when we speak to people, when we speak to each other, we should be trying to not look for how we disagree with them automatically. We should be trying to find ways in which we agree. And that would... goodwill is the term that I'm looking for. We should all be trying to extend a hand of goodwill to each other in all social interactions, I believe. Trying to figure out where we get along more than where we disagree. Just generally speaking, and I think that that would help the overall communication of the world, especially as things become more and more wild with technological advancement and the interconnectivity of things and deliberate misinformation that's being sort of like funneled into everything from all these different avenues just to try to confuse and disorient us and make us feel more alone and disconnected from one another for like genuine malicious reasons. That is happening in the world all the time. So the best thing that we can do is try to be generous with our goodwill towards one another until we have a specific and confirmed reason to not feel that way about another person. Like if you have something that you disagree with a person about, you should really be asking them why they feel that way, rather than telling them why they feel that way. You know? I think that that's a key to getting along better with each other, is really trying to understand the motivations of people. And once you really do understand it, then you're free to be like, well, I think that you are very wrong because of X, Y, and Z. And you should have a few reasons why you disagree with people. It shouldn't just be because somebody you like disagrees with this person and they have a more articulate way of explaining that. You should try to tell people you disagree with specifically why you disagree with them, and you should have your reasons for that. We should all have our own arguments for these arguments. It shouldn't be just parroted arguments that other people have said, you know? So, that being said, I think that there's a couple of things that we could address with this right now. I think that on the left, the people who do not like Donald Trump, which I include myself in that camp, we need to make it a point to remember that not everybody who voted for Donald Trump is a fan of Donald Trump and is this demonized cartoon of a racist crazy person, because some people just vote Republican and always have, and don't really even pay attention to politics, probably as much as they ought to, but in the same way that so many people who vote Democrat just vote Democrat, whatever happens. So if it was The Rock running for the Democratic candidate for president against Donald Trump, a lot of people would be completely appalled by that, but a lot of people would just be like, well, I'm just voting Democratic, and I don't know who Dwayne Johnson is, but I vote Democratic, and then later on they'd have to be like, oh, the wrestling movie man? Like, then they'd come about to understanding it, because people don't pay as much attention as they ought to. So I feel like you can't, even though I believe, and I forget who said it, I want to say it was a comedian, I think it was Alonzo Bowden, who had a great quote about not all Trump supporters are racists, but all racists are Trump supporters. I thought that was I think a difficult to argue with assessment. Not all of them are bad simply because they don't vote the way that you vote. And I think that on the left I put myself on the left for the sake of just splitting people right now. But increasingly over time, I view myself as nothing politically with my allegiance. But anyway, so that's one thing that we could do to try to help let the dust settle a little bit and have a reasonable conversation. On the right, the people who do support Donald Trump, here's what I think you need to do to extend goodwill to the conversation. You need to make it a point to understand that it's very difficult to have a reasonable conversation with someone who doesn't think it's insane that Donald Trump is the president. That's a thing that people on the right who aren't necessarily like opposed to the concept of Donald Trump, even if they don't support him, you need to come to the conversation knowing that it's very, very hard to talk to you, knowing that you're not completely freaked out by the idea that Donald Trump is the president of the United States. That is in some way like a foothold that you trust. You are holding on to that thing as though it's not some kind of crazy ass thing. You know, that's a terrible way to reach a conclusion about that. But the conclusion in my describing it, like, it really is just like walking around holding a dildo at a cocktail party and being like, what? Why is everyone constantly talking about the dildo I'm holding? It's because it's a fucking dildo, and it's a crazy thing to be just walking around with. And maybe we all decided that it wasn't during some election, but it's still fucking weird, and it's always going to be weird. And unless you acknowledge that people are not nuts for thinking that, then we're never going to have a reasonable conversation. We have to get to a place where we can realize when we talk where we come from in either direction, right? So you don't think that it's weird. You don't think that it is sufficiently strange in a way that we do. And as long as you can bring that to the table and be like, look, I know that the idea of Donald Trump being the president is a bonkers situation. I admit to that. But I didn't like Hillary Clinton, and this is where we're at. Let's come up with a solution from here. Then we can have a talk. But in no reality should we ever act like it's not Looney Tunes that guy is the president. None. Because once we do that, then the bar has shifted to a place where there really is no right or wrong, or sane or insane, or nothing makes sense anymore. And don't, look, if you want to go down the road of being like, he was a businessman, and we needed a businessman, and the government's a business, and this and that, and this and that, that's just you digging deeper into this whole pit of insanity, acting like anybody's going to follow you down there and you can trust them to not just suddenly think that mud is food and y'all can just start eating that because you all agree on it. It's not. It's not. Donald Trump is a cartoon character of a businessman. He has owned things. Yes, he inherited shitloads of money from his father. He's never worked a fucking day in his life for anything. The motherfucker prides himself on never having read a book, even though he claims to have written several of them, which we're all aware were ghostwritten by people who have come out against him since then. So you can't hold on to any of that stuff and act like it's sane. You just can't. We have to take it from a place of being like, look, we all make mistakes. Okay? So you voted for Donald Trump. You got the red hat. I'm wearing one right now, not one that's Make America Great hat, but I happen to be wearing a red beanie. I think of it more as a Zizou Society type thing. Either way, we all make mistakes. And come to the table like that, and lefties need to stop thinking that everybody's a fucking racist just because they don't subscribe to all the weird blogs that they do. And if we can at least agree on that, then we can start having a reasonable conversation. But we all need to own up to our own bullshit at a certain point. Also, stop making me try to say all these weird pronouns. That's not going to happen. And here's why. Look, before I go on the begging to get in an argument rant, the reason that I'm saying this is because I've had a lot of hypothetical discussions with people about this, and I will say that I know a small handful of people, mostly in the entertainment community, who are transgendered. And I've never had any kind of beef with them. It's always been just a situation where you're like, hey, how are you? You know, it's like, we're not close friends. I don't have anything negative to say. And here's the funny part. None of them has ever given me shit about the way that I speak to them. Because I like to think that I'm a considerate person, and if there were a situation where they said, I'd actually prefer for you to call me this or that, I would do my best with it, but I'm not really very smart, so I'd probably slip a lot. But here's the larger reason that I say this is because you gotta understand that that's, how am I gonna say this without completely sounding like a monster? Well, the whole preferred pronouns thing works like this, as far as I can tell. You are either a he or a she when you're born. Just, that's what we acknowledge. If you choose to change that later on in your life, that's a choice that you have made as far as what you want to tell people you want to do with your life. And that's, you know, I can feel somebody already out there being irate about, like, you think it's a choice. It's like, it is a choice for you to have decided to tell people that this is what you want to do with your life. So yes, that is a choice. Okay, so we've navigated this little minesweeper scenario, at least to make this point. And at that point, you've decided that this is what you want to do. And so you've decided to basically, for lack of a better expression, make it weird for everybody. That's what happened. It just is. All right. So now the situation is awkward. Well, what was it like for them? You think it wasn't weird for them? No, that isn't what I said. But there was a state of nobody thinking about this, and then they did. That doesn't mean it was on purpose to hurt this person's feelings, although I will recognize that it is it's got to be hard as shit being born in a body that doesn't feel like it's your body, or you have a disconnection with, and I think these are all real things. I think these are genuine, real things that people struggle with, and I do not envy them, and I think that we should do our best to try to, make people feel more comfortable and included in society, and if they feel like that they're not, we'll just be nice to each other. That falls underneath the rubric of being nice to each other, right? So, but here's the problem that you're going to run into, and I feel like you run into a lot when you start talking about these types of things. The thing that people won't admit, which I will, is say we're not super close, right? But we're acquainted enough. We enjoy seeing each other. We have good conversations. If I know you as Brian, for example, and you suddenly tell me you want to be called, let's say you still want to be called Brian, but you don't want me to refer to you as a he or a she. You want me to refer to you as they or them. And you mean this sincerely, and you tell me this. And again, this is not like a close friendship. This is just me being like, well, I like seeing Brian. It's great when we're around each other. If I have to start thinking extra hard about how I refer to you, what'll end up happening is I just won't hang out with you. I'll go out of my way to not hang out with you, not because I dislike you, but just because it's extra, and I don't have it's just annoying. It's just annoying, and it's annoying enough to where I just won't spend time with you. And I don't think a lot of people are willing to admit that, but that's actually what happens, is that you don't wish the person ill will. You don't necessarily want them to get fucking dragged behind a goddamn truck or strung up or nothing. You're just like, I can't deal with extra right now. I don't have the, between trying to pay rent and find reasons enough to not kill yourself, or what's my purpose in life, or fucking, figuring out your phone's data plan, or any of this other shit that we're constantly juggling. I can't deal with that. If it's my brother, or somebody in my immediate family, or somebody who's like a very, very dear friend of mine, yes, I'll take on that responsibility. And I'll actually make it known that I'm doing you like a favor. I'll guilt you about it. I'll be a shithead. Because you're being kind of, you're asking a lot of people when you do that. And that's the truth. That is the truth. You're asking a lot of people when you ask them to not operate in the general rhythm of life for the vast majority of what we all do, specifically for you. And that makes things complicated. So it's not about hating each other. It's just about being aggravated to the point where I just don't really feel like hanging out, because I'm always looking for an excuse to not hang out or do things anyway. We're always looking for an exit to make things more convenient for ourselves. And this is where this really is showing its head. This thing that I'm talking about is the way the conservatives are twisting this misappropriation and overusage of the word hate. They're rubbing it in the faces of people as it relates to Donald Trump and this whole impeachment thing. And what I mean is, you see these Republican representatives going up in public and talking about, there is so much hatred for this president. The hatred for this president. Do you hate Donald Trump that much that you have to hold him accountable for the actual lies and crimes that he's committed? And because the fucking left is so incredibly sensitive to the concept of being accused of hatred because they're throwing it on everybody constantly, that actually makes them cower and be like, no, we don't hate him. We don't hate anyone. We just love the Constitution and we value law and order. And they can't fight that on because they've fucking thrown it around like so much confetti at everyone that they disagree with. They're like, you're full of hate. You have hatred in your heart because you won't say them, they, or we instead of what have you for this one person out of 5,000 who isn't really even being pushy about it themselves, but we decided because we are compassionate that we need to stand up for they. That's the fucking funny part. Is most of these people who actually are struggling through these legitimate problems in their own lives, the vast majority of even that tiny fraction of people, they're not the ones who are cunts about it. It's all the fucking people that claim to be their friends for this weird virtue signaling shit. They want to stand next to a person who's already having a hard enough time acclimating to society and figuring out who they are because they drew the short straw in the genetic or mental lottery of just being like assigned to the correct gender that you feel like you are, and that's got to be complicated in its own right. And then you got these fucking white knight people who are looking for some kind of social cause because they don't have enough purpose in their own lives to try to come up with something that they want to run up next to you and be like, hey, you look like you're confused as to which bathroom to go to. And that person's just like, yeah, well, I wasn't really trying to make that maybe a public thing. I was just sort of, living my life. Who the fuck are you, guy? It's like, me? I'm a hero. That's who I am. And I got a whole crew of heroes back here who are willing to start a hashtag and embarrass the fuck out of you trying to just go in there and take a shit. It's like, all right, well, we all try to change the world in our own ways. But goddamn, it does make me giggle when I see these Democrat people just cowering when they're held up with this like, oh, do you have such hatred for Donald Trump? It's like, yeah, kind of. He's a fucking idiot. And I don't like the idea that he's doing the job. I hate him as the president. How's that? Can I hate the idea that he's the president but not hate the man? Is that something that can happen? Can we draw that line? Can we cut with the hate knife just around the idea that I hate this thing rather than that guy? Because when you separate him from being the president, I actually kind of like him because he's a clown and a crazy entertaining person. But I hate the idea that he's the president of the United States. He's actually kind of funny when he's running a TV show about trying to teach people about business when he doesn't know the first fucking thing about it in the first place with his goddamn clown hair and his raccoon eyes from laying in a tanning booth when he's 90 or however old he is. Weird fat body with your fake goddamn Russian Stepford wife. Oh, it's so crazy. It's so crazy. But anyway, all right, so this is ScienPaulogy, and I have rambled for 29 minutes about God knows what. But you know what? It's cold in here. In my apartment here in Astoria, Queens, it's very cold. I'm completely bundled up. I got my windows closed, but it just feels like air's coming through. All right, well, let's go on to some things that people have talked to me about. Moving along from this wild shit. So, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but let me just take this segment to talk about my show, Elsa, which is a one-person show that I have written and am very much focused on performing and getting in and bringing to Scotland in August for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. That's a big. That's my primary objective right now is in as far as performance and my creative outlets. Elsa is it's a one-man show performed in the style of stand-up comedy that has a lot of heart to it and a lot of comedy to it, and it's all about sort of a condensed and very dense time in my life that is basically the chapter of my life that I've lived here in New York City and the ups and downs of that. And it's just to kind of give you the tagline from the show. It's a one-man show about love, life, loss, and pets. And it's my take on what I've sort of learned and how it relates to all of our lives about the temporary nature of things and the beauty that's within them. And so I'm raising money to try to take that show to Edinburgh, Scotland, and also to several cities in the United States before that, to try to tune it up and get it to a as finely polished a thing as I can before I take it to Edinburgh and perform it there for 23 days in a row in August. And I'm trying to raise $8,000, because to go to Scotland for 23 days, to live there, to travel, to do the things that I need to do, that entire thing is going to be about a $6,000 to $6,500 endeavor. And then the money additional to that is about trying to take this show to several U.S. cities while I'm here before then, and also try to raise money during that time. And to date, it is the 22nd. I started this campaign on the 5th of this month. I'm now up to $2,180, which is fantastic. I have these thanks to give publicly, as is part of the deal, and also just because it's the right thing to do. I'd like to say thank you to Josh Fontenot in Chicago, who donated a second time. My man in Chicago, my buddy, funny motherfucker, Drew Chebin, Fiona Grayson, George Cruchina. I've never been able to say your last name correctly, George, and I'm very sorry about that. I've known George for a long time, and he has a name much like mine, which is very frequently mispronounced, I'm sure. But I love you, George, and thank you very much for your help. I'll let you reprimand me in person for mispronouncing your name. Here's an easy one. Heather Houston, thank you so much. My friend from Texas. Bet Plant, Emily Walker, and Sherry Newman have all donated since the last time that I said thank you on my podcast. So thank you so much to all of you for the donations, and I really do hope and look forward to giving you a tremendous return on your investment in me. I just booked a second date for doing this show in New York City. I've done this once in New York City and once in Houston, so this will be the third performance of the show Elsa, and it's going to be on Friday, February 7th at 7 p.m. at Offside Tavern, which is on 14th Street, near 6th and 7th Avenues. And I did it once there before. They have a big room in the back with a door that closes. It's a very ideal situation to do the show in. It was great before. I'm going to do it again. I've done some rewriting on it. I have a new ending, which I'm really excited to try out, and I feel very strongly about it. I feel like it's much, much stronger than it was before. There's a lot of details about the show that I've tweaked and adjusted. I'm going to try to incorporate my animations in the show, which is something that the final version of it is because the show also deals with my artwork and showcases my artwork, because also during the show I explained this, but I got into drawing people's pet portraits as a result of a lot of what has happened in this story, and so I can show time-lapse animations of me drawing these pet portraits behind me on a screen. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make that happen, so I'm hoping that that'll happen on this round as well. So and that's all partially where that money is going, is to try to give me the opportunity, and I can also pay people to help me put this together. You know, it's really funny. Raising this money for this show has been a very humbling and eye-opening experience, and also a very inspirational experience for me, because I see the generosity in people, and I also am given an opportunity to see how people feel about me and about believing in what I do, which is something that I've always kind of struggled with as a sort of self-loathing creative type. It's difficult for me to not feel like I'm being selfish or self-aggrandizing or whatever that might be, however you want to look at it. Some people don't have that problem. I definitely have that problem with selling myself just because I'm like, who the fuck do you think you are? Why would it, And that's sort of like a voice in my head. But over time, I've gotten enough positive feedback and enough positive reaction to what I produce to know that it's not this thing that I try to constantly trick myself into thinking that it is, which is just like, it's just a form of what some people refer to as resistance, which is something that stands in your way when you're trying to better your life or do anything good or anything like that. So that's a lot of what that is me just kind of pushing the shadows of my own self-doubt and hatred away enough to do something that not only makes my life better, but also really resonates with a lot of other people, I've found. And that's fantastic. So, yeah, it's been a big eye-opening experience with that. But you know what's really interesting is when I talk to some people and I get to see how they feel about the concept of me doing this. And I wouldn't have thought. Like, there's quite a few people out there who really, when I talk to them, project themselves into my place, and I can see their perceived shame as to how, like, I've had people say to me, how did you overcome the feeling of shame in asking people for money? And that caught me at a weird angle. It was almost like getting hit. I remember when I was like 21 or something, I got into a fist fight with a friend of mine. And it was a stupid thing at a house party. And we just started going around and around punching the shit out of each other. And we were in the backyard knocking all this furniture over. And I remember I backed up against a window of this house. And I realized that I was potentially going to break this window with my back. And I wasn't so much concerned about getting hurt as I was not fucking up this window because it was this girl's house and we're all friends with her. And I leaned back. I was like, oh shit, I'm going to break Chelsea's window. And then I turned around, forgetting that I was in a fist fight, and looked up and I saw my now friend, but at the time combatant in this very violent altercation that I was a part of, had my hands down at my side, and he was completely reared back with his fist cocked and coming down at me. And I was like, I'm flat. Like, he's going to break my nose. He's going to fucking knock me out. And he hit me right in the forehead. Now, I have a big forehead, and I know that's a big target, and it probably worked for me. But he hit me as hard as he could right in the forehead. And that may sound bad to you if you've never been hit, but the reality is that's probably one of the best places you could possibly be hit with a fist if you're going to be hit, because it definitely hurts the other person more than it hurts you. And then we just started fighting again, and that ended. People pulled us apart. Actually, it was great. It was great the way it ended. I'll just tell you the rest of that story because it's kind of fun. So they pulled us apart. Our friends pulled us apart. They pulled him apart and wrapped their arms around his arms, right? So we're close to each other, but they pulled me apart and wrapped their arms around my waist. So my arms were still free. So I know this sounds like something you shouldn't do, but I was real mad about getting punched in the head. And I saw that they had him around both of his arms. So his face was just completely exposed. So I got like 4 or 5 punches right in his fucking face, busted his lip open, just because it was like they were holding him for me. And I just clocked him a bunch of times. And then, we all started yelling at each other. And then I went out in the street and walked around and smoked a cigarette, and he eventually came out there and we hugged, and we've been very good friends ever since then. This is a little taste of what it's like to grow up in Texas. Anyway, the reason I brought all that up was because the angle with which somebody asked me about me overcoming my shame in asking for financial support and pursuing this thing, I think that was intended to hurt me more than it did, or they thought it would, but it actually hit me in this very well-guarded emotional place where I'm like, because I believe in what I'm doing. And all I'm really asking people to do is support me if they believe in me. I'm not trying to make it weird for people. Like, if they can't afford to give me money to do this, there's no reason on earth they should do that. Same thing with, like, the Patreon for this show, or any other thing that I ask for support with. I'm also doing pet portraits right now. For $200, I will do a very detailed, personal, like, just for you, handmade drawing of your pet or a pet that you want me to draw for, like, a gift or whatever. I don't see any guilt in asking for that or announcing it because it's a service. It's a thing that I'm doing for you, and I'm also not angry if you don't do it. You know what I mean? So that's another part of it. It's like, I don't have guilt attached to this because I've kind of made my peace with it, you know? And I'm just like, no, it makes sense. If I were full of shit, or if I didn't believe in what I was doing, then I might feel weird about it. If I was selling something I didn't think was worth buying, maybe I would feel bad, but I don't. So that's how I overcome the shame of it, because there is no shame attached to trying to raise money for a thing. Like, if you have a film project, or let's say you're a Hollywood fancy pants, and you got some concept for a movie, and you want to film this movie. I know lots of people who have raised money for films. I've donated money to people who have been raising money for films. Short films, feature films, whatever. Is that something to be ashamed of? I don't think so. You're just trying to get funding together. I would never think about it that way. You have to raise capital to get things done. And we all know working a 9 to 5 or a regular job, whatever that job might be, is not the best way to raise money. You know, that's something that you do for your survival. It's something you do for your day-to-day, and you try to scrape by. And the entire time you're slowly accruing that amount of money, every other giant force in your life is stripping parts of it away. So you kind of just stay at this place where you slowly acquire money. Ideally, if you're doing it right and you're somehow savvy about finances and you're not up to your neck in debt or whatever, then you can slowly accrue a savings over time. But almost nobody has that. Like, almost nobody has any savings. You talk to people and it's rare to speak to people who kind of have their money together, you know? So with something like this, if you're trying to get it done, this crowdsourcing thing, same with this podcast. I am only accruing a fan base of people who enjoy what I'm doing. And that's what I always tell people when they're thinking about like starting up a podcast. It's like, you should. Because even if not everybody likes what you do, that doesn't really matter, because the people who listen to you and continue listening to you are people who like what you do, and they will tell other people, and some of those people will like it and some of them won't. But the more people you get are just fans of the things that you do. So that's one of the beautiful things about, I think, the interconnectivity of the world that we have now, is that we're able to get in touch with like-minded people. And those like-minded people have access to us, and we have access to them, and we can work on things that we enjoy together. Now, there's a lot of negative sides of that too, but that's just what it is when you have more power and freedom. You can do good or bad with it. But I think that these things that I'm talking about, at least, are good. And if you have an idea for something, or you need help with something, or you're trying to raise money or raise awareness or any of these things, like, that's one of the many positive facets of this weird gem that we've discovered as a people, which is the Internet of Things, if you want to use that fucking annoying terminology. So yeah, I'm at $2,180. I'm trying to get to 8,000. If you want to donate, I would love to have your donation. And there's a series of benefits that you can get in in response to your donation. And that's all I post it everywhere. It's on my GoFundMe, and I put it on my social media and all that. So if you would like to do that and you would like to help me, I would love to have your help. But again, if you can't, fucking don't. Not at all. I would never ask something of you that you could not readily give. And this goes for the people that are supporting me on the GoFundMe for this, or not the GoFundMe, but for the Patreon for this podcast. I am so incredibly appreciative of the help that you give and the financial help that you give for this show. I have 3 primary patrons on my Patreon account. You guys mean the world to me. And every single time that I see that money in my account, I'm like, this is such validation for what I do and makes me inspired to do this more. I can't even tell you how important that is to me. But if you can't afford it, don't fucking do it. Absolutely not. This is a thing that we're doing for entertainment and also to like feel more together in a thing, and that's awesome. But again, if you're in some financial straits, fucking, this is buy food, pay rent. Don't feel bad about it. I'm gonna do this either way. So I love you, and I love your help. But believe me, I would much rather you be safe and secure and not panicked about money, because God knows I've been there tons of times. All right, let's talk about something else for a second. So I saw this this tweet that a person posted the other day, and it made me very happy. So this guy, John Wayne Ferguson, who is he's a reporter at the Galveston News. Galveston is a town just outside. It's an island city outside of Houston. And I just saw this tweet, and it made me happy. Missing monkey update. The monkey is still missing, and there have been no sightings. Police believe statements about monkey's death were purposeful misinformation. The monkey's owner is no longer cooperating with police. That's the only tweet I know about, and that's the only one I want to see, because I love the story that paints in my mind. I like that this is potentially the beginning of some project that Liam Neeson maybe shouldn't have signed up for. The monkey's owner is no longer cooperating with the police. Is a fun way to start a very weird story. So I wish the best for those people with the monkey. This was I've known a surprising amount of people that have owned monkeys in my life. Maybe that's another weird Texas thing. It's never a good idea. I've never heard one story of somebody owning a monkey and them being like, that monkey was a good idea. We never regretted owning those monkeys. I think a monkey is a fun thing to look at and then walk away. I don't think you want to be invested in monkey stuff. They catch all the same diseases that we do. They don't know to not throw their shit, or they do know to throw their shit to get things, to make points. Things that we've sort of outgrown as a species, for the most part. So I hope the monkey's alright. But it sounds like that's a whole handful of stuff. Alright, somebody sent me this video. This is something interesting that I would like to talk about. Where are we at? Like 48 minutes. Okay. So we should start wrapping it up. Not safe for work, this says. Tiger attacks men on elephant out of nowhere. And this is on something called Nature is Metal. So this is, I'm going to play this and see what it is. Alright, so there's a guy on an elephant. Oh shit. Jesus Christ. Alright, hold on. I got to pause this just to see what's going on. So there's a man, looks like he's Indian or Pakistani. I'm sorry if that offends you. If that offends you, you were going to be offended either way. He's on an elephant. He's got 2 pieces of bamboo. Looks like a couple of sticks. There's a big green field. And out of the field, here comes a tiger and jumps up. Jesus Christ. It jumps up and fucking swats him on the elephant, which is probably at least 8 feet up. God damn. You think about how high cats can jump, just like a house cat? A house cat can jump way higher than you think it can. Can you imagine the fucking height? Height, by the way, not height. For those of you out there saying height, stop. That's not a word. You need to be aware of that. Just be aware of that. Okay? Width is a word. Height is not. Height. Continuing on. This tiger jumps all the way the fuck. Why does this guy think these sticks are gonna... He's got 2 sticks. Gee, what the fuck is this? So this was your plan. I don't think that he'll be able to get up this high. Fuck you, dude. That's terrifying. That is terrifying. Is this guy dead? Am I watching somebody get killed? You got 2 pieces of bamboo. What the fuck are you even doing with those? Jesus Christ. Don't be fucking with tigers, man. That's so insane. This guy's got 2 sticks, like that's gonna help him against a full-grown tiger. If you're dead, that's just what happens to you. Thanks for sending me that. I'll have bad dreams. Alright, somebody else sent me this one. There's a lot of downer shit people have sent me. Dead homeless man covered in bed bugs found on Manhattan subway, sources say. Okay. I believe that. A homeless man covered in bed bugs was found... Jeez. Homeless man covered in bed bugs on an Uptown D train as it pulled into the Columbus Circle station Tuesday night was found dead. Great. What are we doing about that? Let's see what all the clickbait at the bottom of that is. How to order an In-N-Out burger at Burger King prices. Yeah, that's what we're going to sell our advertising. Most Christians can't pass this basic biblical quiz. It's just a picture of Jesus. How to empty your bowels every morning, top surgeons say. There's a man in a doctor's scrubs superimposed over a pot containing 4 eggs. Looks like they're being cooked in tea. This is all very interesting. How to locate anyone in 10 seconds. It's so simple. Let's all sell that attached to the tragedy of human existence about a man who was so covered in bed bugs that he died in public on a train. Cool. I'm going to go back to this missing monkey update because that's a little bit more uplifting. Oh, there's a picture of a baboon on a cell phone. Get my lawyer. For Christ's sake. The world's a crazy place. Let's at least do our best to try to not make it worse, okay? Extend goodwill to each other. Do your best. If you have a thing that you need to raise money for, don't feel like there's some shame attached to that. Just think about what it is, and people like to help. So many people have helped me with this. So many people are out there willing to help and looking for anything to be a part of that means something. Because there's so many things that don't mean anything, right? So many things that mean nothing. So anytime we can find something that actually, like, we can attach our heart and purpose to, it's great. So don't be so worried. Just try to entwined in the fucking nonsense out there about pronouns and horse shit. Fucking missing monkeys. And if you're going to go out there to try to catch a lion, don't bring 2 sticks. I don't care how big the elephant you're riding on is. Those are words to live by. Alright guys, this has been ScienPaulogy, episode 51. If you have any weird videos or emails or advice or suggestions or stories about things that have happened to you, send them to me. I'll talk about them on the podcast next week or whenever. And yeah, I love being here with you guys. I hope that this has helped you pass a little bit of time. We're at like 53 minutes, so we should probably call it. And yeah, if you're in New York City on February the 7th at 7 p.m. on Friday, come to Elsa. Come to see the show. I need to have people there. I'm going to be filming it to try to get like more venue stuff going on in Scotland in August, and also to promote this to other festivals and things like that. So it's important that I get people there, and I think you're really going to enjoy the show because it's the best thing I've ever done, genuinely. And thank you guys all again for everything. It means more than I can tell you. There's a bulldog out the window. That's a good dog. Guys, take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Please leave a review on iTunes, a positive review for the podcast if you want to help like that. It always does mean a lot to me, and it helps spread the word of the podcast. And yeah, if you want to join the Patreon, paulodo.com. Scroll down to the middle of the page. You can see it there. I'd love to have you. Again, if you can't afford it, don't fucking worry about it for a second. But in between now and then, take care of yourselves. And do not be afraid. Okay? This is ScienPaulogy, episode 51. Paul Oddo speaking to you. Until next time, guys, take care. How do I turn this goddamn thing off?